In the old pages of Greek history, there is a battle remembered for more than 2,000 years. A moment when courage and conviction stood against the weight of a vast empire. In the year 479 BC, on the quiet lands of Boeotia near the small town called Plataea, the fate of Greece hung in the balance. The Persian Empire, led by King Xerxes, had swept into Europe like a gathering storm. They carried with them the ambition to extend their rule deep into the Greek city-states, small, proud communities that refused to bend. Standing against that mighty force was a coalition of Greek city-states. Sparta, Athens, and many others took their place side by side for the first time. Not because they were alike, but because they understood one truth. If they fell today, there would be no Greece tomorrow. If you enjoy historical stories told with clarity and a calm pace, please consider subscribing so you won't miss the next great battles of history. When the Greek forces gathered at Plataea, they faced a harsh reality. They were outnumbered, they lacked cavalry, and they stood against a Persian army seasoned by countless campaigns across Asia. Yet Pausanias chose a position that turned their weakness into an advantage. He placed his men on a gentle rise, not a steep hill, but a slight elevation, just high enough to slow Persian cavalry and blunt the force of a direct charge. From a distance, the ground looked ordinary, but to the Spartans, it was a natural shield protecting the whole alliance. On this higher ground, the Greek forces spread out like pieces of a carefully arranged mosaic. At the center stood the Spartans, the most disciplined warriors, the iron wall expected to absorb the heaviest blows once the battle began. They remained silent, and that silence carried more weight than the shouts of any army. To the left, Athens and its allied city-states formed a long, steady line. They were not as harshly trained as the Spartans, but they carried their own kind of pride. The Athenians were not just defending land, they were defending the honor of a free and cultured city. Behind them stood smaller Greek regions, Megara, Tegea, Corinth and others. Each brought what strength they could. Each carried their own fear and hope into the coming storm. This alliance was far from perfect, but it was all that Greece could gather in the face of survival. Meanwhile, on the lower open ground, the Persian army arranged itself with far greater confidence. Mardonius, entrusted by King Xerxes with full authority, chose a broad plain where his elite cavalry could move freely. He formed his soldiers in layers, like waves preparing to crash onto the shore. In front were the cavalry, men who had spread fear across distant battlefields. Behind them stood the archers, capable of darkening the sky with arrows in just a few breaths. Farther back, the Persian infantry waited, well-trained and better equipped than most Greek soldiers. And one thing made this battle even more painful. Facing Athens were not only Persians. Thebes, Macedonia and Thessaly, Greek lands that had chosen to side with Persia, marched with the invaders. They advanced against their own people. From afar, the two armies looked like two opposing images of Greece. On one side, a fragile but determined unity. On the other, the shattered pieces of a nation pulled apart by foreign power. The air over the Plataean plain that day felt heavy, like early morning fog. Not because of the weather, but because everyone present understood one simple truth. After this day, either Greece would remain free, or its history would be written by Persia. Once both armies had taken their positions, the silence of the battlefield was broken by the first sound of conflict. It wasn't a battle cry. It wasn't the clash of metal. It was the measured, intentional rhythm of hooves striking the earth. The Persian cavalry began to move. They did not charge straight into the Greek lines. Instead, they swept in wide arcs, drifting close, then pulling away again. Their movements resembled a probing hand, testing a wall for its weakest point. The Spartans remained still. Their shields stayed raised. Their bronze helmets did not tremble. They watched each approach and retreat of the horses without giving any reaction. The Persian riders returned for a second attempt. This time they rode nearer. A few spears were cast, as if teasing for a response, yet not a single Spartan broke formation. Their line stood rooted, as if carved into the very ground beneath them. Seeing this, the Athenians on the left flank understood that this battle would be unlike any they had fought before. Sparta would not chase or lash out at provocations. They would wait. They would force Persia to exhaust itself before the true clash began. But the Persian cavalry did not stop. They circled again and again around the Spartan position, like hunting birds trying to wear down their prey. The air grew tense. No one could tell when the real strike would fall. On the Greek left, the Athenians felt their own pressure, not from cavalry, but from the Greek contingents who had sided with Persia, Thebans, Macedonians, and Thessalians. The weight of facing fellow Greeks stung more than any spear. It was a battle of kin against kin. The Athenians tightened their formation. Their shields pressed together into a solid wall. Their long spears rose like a forest of sharp branches. No one spoke, yet they all understood. Today, they stood against men who shared the same ancestors. Time passed slowly. These skirmishes lasted not minutes, but hours. The Persian cavalry circled, struck lightly, then vanished into open space again, leaving trails of dust behind them. Their objective was clear: to chip away at Spartan composure, to break the Greek formation before Mardonius arrived with the full might of the Persian army. But the Spartans' resolve shattered that plan. Not one warrior stepped out of line. No one chased the riders. No one allowed emotion to disturb the wall of discipline. When the final waves of harassment faded and the cavalry pulled back, the ground was scarred with countless hoofprints. Dust hung suspended in the air, and in that brief lull, when everything seemed to hold its breath, a distant sound rose across the plain. A war horn, long, clear, heavy. It was the signal that the main Persian force was approaching, and the real battle was about to begin. After hours of ineffective harassment, the Persian cavalry suddenly pulled back behind their own lines. The ground seemed to fall silent for a brief moment. No one knew what was happening. Then the sound of the Persian war horn rose again, this time louder, deeper, and stretched long enough to feel like it was tearing the air apart. This was no longer probing. It was the signal that Mardonius had arrived. From the distance, a sea of soldiers began to appear. Armor glinted under the sun. Banners whipped in the wind. The rhythm of thousands of marching feet made the earth beneath Sparta tremble lightly. The full weight of the Persian main army now stood before the Spartans. They advanced with the confidence of conquerors, men who had subdued lands far larger than Greece. Their formations rolled forward in layered ranks, like waves rising from the ocean. At the center of this vast host, Mardonius rode a tall warhorse, his armor shining across his entire body. He studied the Spartan line, hoplites standing motionless, like a stone cliff waiting for the storm to break upon it. Then Persia opened the battle, not with infantry, but with something meant to shake the soul immediately. The first volleys of arrows. Hundreds of Persian archers drew their bows at once, a sharp, unified whisper of bowstrings. Then the sky above the Spartans darkened for a heartbeat as arrows filled the air. The storm of arrows fell. Spartan bronze shields absorbed most of the impact. Metal struck metal again and again, like a hailstorm pounding a roof. A few arrows slipped through narrow gaps, bringing down several warriors. But the line did not waver. Sparta held firm. Persia continued firing, wave after wave of arrows, but the shield wall was thick, disciplined, and unwavering enough to endure the assault. When the arrows no longer broke the line, Mardonius ordered the infantry forward. They surged ahead, armor clattering in a heavy, thunderous roar. These were soldiers who had frightened many lands, Yet now they faced something rare, a formation that did not fear them. The Spartans lowered their spears. They stepped forward once, then again. Slow, steady, deliberate, almost frightening in their control. The moment the two lines collided felt like two great stone walls slamming into each other. Metal cracked. Voices rose in cries of pain and fury. Dust exploded upward in thick clouds. The Persians strained to break the hoplite formation. They pushed hard. They attempted flanking strikes. They searched desperately for even the smallest gap. But Sparta had waited for this moment all day. They stayed locked in place. No one abandoned their position. No one rushed ahead on impulse. No one allowed emotion to override discipline. On the left flank, the Athenians maintained their own fierce struggle. They faced Thebans and other Greeks fighting for Persia. Spears clashed with heavy, deliberate force. Shields struck with deep, resonant thuds. They fought not only for Greece, but to prove that Athens would never bow to foreign power and would never accept betrayal from their own. Back at the center, chaos grew thicker. Persia still had numbers. They continued to press forward, but Sparta advanced in tiny, relentless steps, firm, measured, unstoppable. It was not a wild charge. It was endurance, a kind of determination that drains the enemy before it destroys them. All around, the battlefield shook with cries, armor falling, and thousands of warriors clashing for the fate of an entire land. Then, in the midst of that storm, something happened. Something no one expected. Something that would turn the entire battle on its head. Amid the chaos of steel, dust, and screams, the Persian formation grew increasingly unstable. They had numbers, but they couldn't press forward together. The slight slope beneath them squeezed their ranks tight and threw their advance into confusion. The infantry at the rear pushed ahead, while those at the front were blocked, and the massive army began to unravel. Through this turmoil, Mardonius rode along the front lines. He tried to steady his soldiers, pointing, shouting orders, urging them to hold discipline. His silver armor caught the sunlight, making him unmistakable among the thousands around him. Mardonius knew that if Persian morale broke, the entire battle would collapse like a dam weakened from below. So he forced himself closer to the thickest fighting, even though he understood it was the most dangerous place on the field. The Spartans advanced in short, heavy steps. They did not run. They did not shout. They moved like a slow river of bronze, steady and relentless. Their calm progress disoriented the Persians. They couldn't knock the Spartans off balance, nor push them back even an inch. At that moment, a large stone, whether thrown by a Greek warrior or flung up from the chaotic ground, struck Mardonius's horse. The animal reared violently. Mardonius lost his balance, and as he struggled to steady himself, Spartan spears thrust forward. No one knew which spear delivered the fatal blow. But one thing was certain. Mardonius fell in the middle of the battlefield, struck down by the very men Persia had underestimated for years. The sound of his fall was not loud, just armor hitting dusty earth. But that small sound spread through the Persian ranks faster than any command. Those nearest saw him go down. They froze for a heartbeat. Then some stepped back, then more. Retreat rippled outward like water flowing downhill. In only a few breaths, the entire Persian center began to buckle. The news of their commander's death shot through the army like a spark in dry grass. Persia had always believed that sheer numbers and strength would crush Greece. But with Mardonius gone, they lost the will that held their army together. The cavalry no longer had their leader. The archers hesitated, unsure whether to fire or flee. The infantry stood confused, unable to maintain coordination. With chaos erupting on all three fronts, the Persian lines shattered, not in small pockets, but in great sheets, like glass cracking from its center, and splitting in every direction. The Spartans noticed instantly. They didn't need new orders. Their formation tightened, and they pressed forward. Each step felt like another nail driven into the final coffin of Persian hope. On the left flank, the Athenians soon heard the news as well. The Thebans and the other Greek allies fighting for Persia, already conflicted, already half-hearted, now lost all resolve. No one wanted to remain on the side destined to fall. The Greek forces under Persia's banner began to withdraw. First a few, then dozens, then entire units broke and ran. The Persian center had collapsed, their left disintegrated, and their right wing began to peel away from the field. Xerxes' grand dream of conquering Greece, once believed inevitable, fell apart in the very place he thought himself strongest. Mardonius fell, and with him fell the spirit of the Persian army. The death of Mardonius did more than shake the Persian ranks. It shattered the confidence they had carried since the invasion began. This army, once so certain of its strength, now faced the truth. They had no commander, no direction, and no spirit left to fight. Chaos spread quickly. At the center, where Mardonius had fallen, the Persians began to retreat almost without thinking. At first, it was only a few scattered groups, stepping back in confusion. But on a battlefield, a single step backward can become a signal for disaster. Those behind saw the retreat. They hesitated. Then they followed. Within moments, the entire center of the Persian army looked like a broken tide, rolling backward in panic. The Spartans seized the moment immediately. They did not rush forward recklessly. They did not shout in triumph. They simply tightened their formation and advanced with slow, heavy certainty. Each step like the beat of a drum, marking the end of Persia's advance into Greece. This steady pressure terrified the fleeing Persians even more. An army in retreat hopes for mercy or an opening, but Sparta offered neither. On the left flank, the Athenians had already driven back the Greek contingents who fought for Persia. Thebes, Thessaly, Macedonia. Their warriors had long been fighting with half a heart. When word reached them that Mardonius was dead, their resolve crumbled completely. Some tried to retreat in order. Others threw down their shields and ran blindly. Many slipped away into the fields, desperate to distance themselves from what they knew was a doomed cause. The Athenians did not chase recklessly. They held their lines, cautious and disciplined, knowing a battle can turn if an army grows careless too soon. Back in the center, the Spartans moved through what was supposed to be the strongest point of the Persian force. But it was no longer a defense. Only scattered weapons, fallen soldiers, and riders fleeing in all directions. The Spartan phalanx continued its march as a single block of iron, unbroken, unhurried, unafraid. Persian soldiers ran wherever they could find space. They stumbled over one another. Some collided with fleeing cavalry. Others tried to form small pockets of resistance, but they were quickly overwhelmed. What began as a retreat turned into a full collapse, and as each Persian unit broke apart, the Greeks understood. The battle was turning entirely in their favor. The grand confidence of Persia, the belief that Greece would fall like countless other lands, was fading into dust. All that remained was for the Greeks to finish what they had begun. As the Persians broke and ran, the battlefield at Plataea became more chaotic than ever. The once mighty formations that stretched across the plain now dissolved into scattered groups of frightened men. Some ran toward open fields, some toward shallow streams, others simply away from the Spartan spears, anywhere that seemed like a chance at survival. The Spartans, after shattering the Persian center, advanced with the same discipline they had shown from the start. They did not rush headlong into the confusion. They maintained formation, steady, firm, precise. Their calm advance made the fleeing Persians even more desperate, for there was no mistake to exploit, no weakness to hope for. On the left flank, the Athenians had already forced the Thebans, Thessalians, and Macedonians into retreat. These Greek allies of Persia had fought with hesitation from the beginning, and with Mardonius gone, they could not find the courage to continue. They fled in disarray, some dropping their shields, others vanishing into hillsides or small thickets to escape the judgment they feared from both sides. The Athenians did not pursue recklessly. They held the line, wary of any sudden counterattack, knowing how quickly a moment of carelessness could undo an entire battle. Meanwhile, the Persian army at the center collapsed completely. The battlefield where Mardonius once rode now lay strewn with broken weapons, abandoned armor, and fallen horses. Commanders tried to rally small groups, but the panic spreading through the ranks made it impossible. The Spartans continued forward, cold and focused. Every step tightened the noose around the remaining Persians. Those who tried to resist were pushed back instantly. Those who attempted to regroup found themselves alone and overwhelmed. Across the plain, cries faded. Weapons clattered to the ground. What had once been the proud heart of Persia's invasion force was now a fractured mass, scattering in all directions. Slowly, unmistakably, the Greeks realized that the battle was theirs. The Persian left had fallen. Their right was retreating. Their center no longer existed. What remained of Xerxes' grand ambition to conquer Greece, an ambition once thought unstoppable, was dissolving under the steady advance of Greek hoplites. And as the last pockets of resistance vanished, one truth became clear. With the fall of Mardonius came the fall of Persia's will to fight. The great invasion, the mighty force that once threatened all of Greece, now scattered like dust across the fields of Plataea. When the Battle of Plataea finally ended, the wide plain was silent except for the wind moving through broken armor and drifting dust. The Persian army, once certain that nothing could stop them, had completely collapsed. No commander, no formation, no will left to continue the campaign. In contrast, the Greek alliance, Sparta, Athens, and their allied city-states stood firm after a long and bloody day. They did not win through sheer numbers. They prevailed through discipline, endurance, and above all, unity in their most desperate moment. Plataea ended Persia's ambition to conquer Greece, and it opened the door to a rebirth of Greek culture, a revival that allowed philosophy, art, and the spirit of freedom to flourish for centuries to come. From that time on, Plataea has been remembered as a reminder. Even a small nation can stand firm against a mighty empire, if its people stand together. If you've watched this far, we warmly invite you to share your thoughts. What part of the Battle of Plataea resonated with you the most? Stories like this become even more meaningful when heard through the experiences and reflections of those who came before us. Thank you for being here with us. We hope to see you again in the next great chapter of human history.